Hi, everybody. I'm Dave,
I'm Courtney.
and we're the Counseling Geeks. Welcome to another video. We are on a stream of videos that we're talking about trauma. And the last videos we talked about um, all the things that we think about before we get into the actual treatment of trauma. And I believe the last video, we mentioned grounding skills. Those are things like relaxation techniques, meditation, uh, mindfulness, things like that to get you started. Um, and of course, as always, just the relationship, and because we have to have the trust to be able to move forward and for you to unload all of your stuff anyways. So the relationship is extremely important. Today, yet another thing that we consider is your environment and your support. And those are things that we consider before we get into all of the interventions, sorry, for trauma, because it becomes so important. If you do not have the and support or a supportive environment, it's going to be very difficult to work through the issues that you're working through. One of the things that we'll be concerned about is who is in your life, what effect that they're having on you, or what kind of effect you're having on them as well. And making sure that when you need someone to lean on, because when you start going through all the motions of addressing your trauma, things are going to get worse, and you're going to need somebody there to lean on. You're going to need somebody to be able to talk through things. You're going to need somebody to, at times, carry you emotionally through some things, make sure that you're safe, all that sort of thing. Now, we understand that not everybody can have an environment that um, is supportive and um, and not abusive. I mean, there are many people that we see um, that they can't get out of the environment that they're in. However, one of the things that we do is try to see if they can identify some new supports or some whether it be within your family or in your community or what have you. It's just super important for you to have that support that you need, and we can't stress it enough how much that affects your success in addressing the trauma that you have. So that's going to be another thing that is going to be of consideration before we even start the interventions. Courtney, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so like Dave was saying, we really want to make sure that you have a good, support system in place. Something that we talked about, like before the video, was uh, we see a lot of people with what we call dual diagnosis. So they might have trauma, but they're using substances, so they might have substance use going on, and so for us, that's something that we need to assess to kind of see like where you're at. Obviously, if you're in active addiction, we're not going to do any kind of trauma work. We're going to assess to see if you need a higher level of care, if you need rehab, something like that. However, if you're new to recovery and this is something that you kind of have identified that you would like to work on, so not necessarily every single time, but there's so many times that the root of the substance use was a trauma that was just never resolved. And so people sometimes come to that realization and they want to work on it. But if you're new to recovery, ethically, you got to have at least 6 months of clean time before I will delve into trauma work. And even then, I'm going to like we talked about in the last video, inundate you with a ton of coping skills and relaxation skills and encourage you to find a support system, whether that's through 12-step, whether that's through your spiritual community, any kind of program. But in a sense, my hope is that there's some kind of program that you're working. Because that means to me that there's going to be some type of support system in your life and in place as we move forward and begin to tackle some of the trauma or do some reprocessing. You know, so again, if you're in early recovery, we're looking at the environment that you're in, but we're also looking at the support systems as well too. So that's something else that we have to consider.
Right. Well, and be leery of therapists that say, "Oh, okay, we'll address your addiction while we're doing this." It has to be separate. There are some therapists out there that are trauma therapists, but they might also be good with drug and alcohol. Like Courtney and I, we have expertise in both, and so if we need to address, we're not set up to be a drug and alcohol facility. However, we can address the addiction issues, but know that we would be addressing them first, because we can't do any trauma work before your addiction is taken care of. So that's extremely important, and I know it's going to be frustrating to have to do that, but we want you to be successful. We don't want you to fail. So that's why we make that important. And it's not us making it important. All the research says take care of your addiction first before you address your trauma.
Mm-hmm. And there's that I've done with clients in the past that, or maybe they do have they have like maybe, obviously over that 6 months of clean time, they might have a little bit more and they're working on the steps. Something that I've done with clients is, if they're working 12-step program and they're going to AA or NA, sometimes we approach the steps from a trauma-informed perspective, especially step 4. So if you guys aren't familiar with step 4, it's really looking at the events that may be taking place in your life and taking responsibility, or really looking at those things. But sometimes when people start to uncover all of the things that they've done in addiction, it brings about an immense shame and guilt, and that sometimes takes people right back out. So we take it from a more trauma-informed perspective to say, really, let's kind of consider the trauma as you're working this step. So I can help somebody, from that perspective, while obviously they're working with their sponsor, they're going to meetings and all of that kind of thing. But sometimes it's nice to look at those steps from a trauma-informed perspective and give somebody a little bit of a different outlook as they're doing the workbook, or as they're as they're working the steps. So it's just really important, like Dave is saying, to make sure that that area is really stable before we delve in. But we can certainly take a trauma-informed perspective, which is different than a trauma intervention. So just to separate the two. But yeah, that's very important as well too.
Right. All right. So that's it for this video. We're next videos, we're going to continue with trauma and the interventions and considerations that we need to take on when we're trying to help you through it. So stay tuned. We're coming back. Make sure to like us and comment.
Sounds good. We'll see you in our next video.
Bye-bye.